The architecture for what I'm about to propose to you is already in federal law. We don't actually have to make anything up. We don't need new legislation. We need political will and courage and a real and accurate understanding of the system we currently work in. So if I spontaneously combust up here, take this one away, okay? Behavioral health is not simply a response to pathology. It's a tool for healthy development for all children. It is a tool for equity. We got to go back to go forward. Not everybody comes to the starting line equally endowed. For those of us in the public health world, equity means you get what you need, not that you get the same. Some people need more. And it also is a tool for systems change. So I'm actually going to ask you to be my client for a second and look at the problem not as a problem, but as a solution. I actually think behavioral health could be the tool to drive transformation across our entire child-serving system, because as I'll show you, behavioral health is already the common denominator that ties a fragmented children's mental health system together. If you're in special education, you know that half of all counseling is already paid for by EPSTT. If you're in child welfare, you know that 40% of all residential placements is already paid for by EPSTT. If you're in early childhood, you know that home visiting is basically funded by TCM and MA, Medicaid. So we already have a common denominator across child-serving systems that's underinvested, underleveraged. We just need to use it. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some data that will make you uncomfortable, so don't stick with me in the problem. I'm giving you the problem because there actually is a crisis. Something is happening in the lives of young people that's different now than before. I'm going to show you suicide rates, self-injury rates. I'm going to show you mood and anxiety disorders. I'm going to show you a lot of tough, real data that even though I was a therapist in the Oakland Public Schools, that I worked at Children's Hospital Research Center, Oakland, I've worked at ED as a social worker, I've run a sexual assault unit. I've worked around a lot of young people experiencing difficult times. But what I'm going to show you is over the last 10 years, it's gotten a lot worse. And it's worse across every indicator, and it's driving cost and utilization in the broader healthcare industry, and I use that term carefully, industry, right? Across all disease burdens, hospital stays are shortening, with the exception of mental health. In fact, there's been a 50% increase in hospital days for kids over the last decade. So I'll ask you to hold that data largely as a symbol of an opportunity. When the economic imperative overlaps the social justice imperative, you get change. And I'm suggesting we're at a unique moment in time. It's right now. Mental health and substance abuse are the leading causes of disease burden in America. This is a public health nerd's dream here. This is called DAILIES, and it basically refers to disability days and days of life lost. But when you compare the burden of mental health on our culture in terms of days lost to disability and days of life shortened, mental health far exceeds any other disease burden, cancer or any other one. And if you look at kids, it shouldn't be surprising, behavioral health is the leading cause of morbidity. The 3 leading causes of death for young people, homicide, suicide, injury, cars, right? What's really important about this is number 2, suicide. Over the last decade, suicide has leapfrogged cancer and car wrecks as a cause of death. I mean, just think for a second. Just in the last decade, suicide has leapfrogged cancer and car wrecks as a cause of death. Kids are hurting themselves and each other at rates our society has never seen. And a fascinating opportunity in California is while there are 10 million children, and we're the 5th largest economy in the world, and as you know, 20% of kids live in poverty, and for the first time in our nation, half of those kids will earn less than their parents, and soon, 8 out of 10 will never get out of poverty. So this idea that poverty is more stable now than it has ever been, I would ask you to hold that, because I think that's partly the cause. We can chop it up about all these other causes, but part of the cause of some of the increasing acuity and utilization we're seeing is that there is a hopelessness in the lives of young people that we simply must address. More than 6 million of California's 10 million kids are federally entitled under that EPSTT thing, right? 6.2 million of California's children are now covered by Medicaid. That's a 33% increase in the last 5 years. I'll quickly give you the drivers. The first, of course, was the Affordable Care Act. A lot of people who were previously eligible came out and got what they were entitled to. The second was SB 75, where we bravely and courageously cover the undocs. And the third is the people under the exchange, these folks who make 138 to 250% of federal poverty who with kids who qualify for S-CHIP. So remember how we moved healthy families into Medicaid? That S-CHIP conversion added another 400,000 kids. So this 33% increase in Medicaid has made the dominant payer in the space for children Medicaid with its EPSDT federal entitlement to everything that kids need and require. So we finally have achieved 96% coverage. So for those of us who've worked on many children's health insurance initiatives, thank God we're done with that, man, right? It's like dangling grapes over people who can't reach them. All children now have coverage. After the Affordable Care Act passed, behavioral health is now an essential benefit. You gotta have it. In fact, it's federally entitled under EPSDT. And we have even greater force moving with the Federal Parity Act of 2015. So there's increasing pressure on both commercial and Medicaid to provide equal access to behavioral health as you provide to physical health. And I don't have to tell folks in this room, low-income children and children of color experience adversity at greater rates. I just went through the Pearl study. So as I said, there is a real crisis, there is an opportunity, and we're asking you to join us today. What I'm asking of all of us is to reinvent how we define behavioral health, not just a response to pathology. I'm going to suggest a way that we could fund it different, at scale, at least double the investment that we currently have. But we have to change how we administer it, and we have to change how we measure it. Not just the absence of disease, but the presence of health. As just an example, I ran a behavioral health department. I was the healthcare director in Alameda County. One of the departments I ran was behavioral health. We were about $600 million. We had 128 full-time finance staff, cleaning millions of lines of code at $68 per code. So for those of you who aren't in the healthcare world, in physical health, health plans, which I've sat on the board of, get their money from the state in capitation, dollar for dollar, right? It's half fed, half state. It comes to the plan spends it. For county mental health departments, you get the state share in a block, and then you have to bill per minute, per unit, per kid, per diagnosis. That's what those 128 people were doing. So if you want to know, it actually does suck. It's hard. Providers, the clinical programs I started at Children's Oakland, now there's 60-some providers. I met with them last week. They told me 55% of their time is spent billing, right? Then you double that again at the county level, my 128 people. And then the health plan I served on with 500,000 members or so had 6 finance staff because they don't have to chase that federal participation, right? And guess what? Lots of counties don't even chase it because it's too burdensome. So when you look at the broad kind of array, in my county, we chased the money because we needed it. And that's how I was trained by my ancestors and forebears. But go get it, hustle for poor people. But not every county has that depth and capacity, and that's why you see such dramatic geographic challenges. The faces of Medicaid are kids of color, 63% are Latino, and there's no doubt that children's mental health is underperforming. So I have talked to a lot of people over the last year since I've been engaged in this project. I haven't met a single person who says, oh yeah, we got children's mental health covered, don't worry about that, right? Not one. And the data is super striking. Most children get no support, many get the wrong kind. While everyone is covered, most get nothing, and 1 in 4 receive what they get, but far too late, often a year or 2 after symptomatology. And we're actually doing worse, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. There is now, for the first time in our state's history, something called the Performance Outcome System. We can measure who got what. Of those 6.2 million children in Medicaid, only 3% of them are in ongoing care for mental health, and only 4% got touched at all. So forget quality, forget timeliness, forget appropriateness, right? Because the vast majority of clinical service delivery is white women of privilege, which, no problem with them. We need them. I married one. But we actually need services that better reflect the communities we serve, given the data I just showed you. And so our system is dramatically underperforming. This data is the data I referenced at the beginning of the talk about the increasing acuity and utilization. And this should make you uncomfortable. So it's just numbers, but remember, every one of these numbers represents a young person suffering. There's been a 104% increase for kids 1 to 17 and a 151% increase for children 10 to 14 in terms of self-injurious behavior. That's cutting, suicide attempt, suicide ideation. ED visits for impulse control have increased 71%. We're spending billions, and as I mentioned, there's a 50% increase in hospital days. By any standard measure, kids are hurting themselves and others at rates our society has never seen. We're not making it up. This is not just a do it for the kids thing. This is kids cutting, killing, dying, and hurting at rates almost twice what they were previously. Things are getting worse. For adolescents, the self-reported mental health needs have increased 61% since 2005. And again, we can chop it up. Is it this thing, right? Is it the compare and contrast of social media? Is it the extended adolescence if it takes longer to get into the workplace? Is it structural racism? Is it the stabilization of poverty? The answer is yes, of course, it's all those things. But there's no doubt it is happening, and we must respond. Hospitalizations have increased 50%, as I mentioned, and more children are eligible for services. That's that 33% increase I referenced, but fewer are getting it. So despite a 20% increase in crisis service utilization, our penetration rates across the state are dropping from 4.5% to 4.1%. So a 9% decrease of kids actually getting care in the face of these striking acuity and need. The medical model isn't the answer. While I have run health systems and I'm a huge believer in primary care is the greatest invention of Western medicine, guess what? And I don't need to tell anybody this who works in a school or anywhere else in the safety net. We don't have enough of them, and 75% of mental illness manifests between the age of 10 and 24. So guess what happens when you look at utilization of primary care at around 8 or 9? Adolescents have the lowest rate of healthcare utilization of any demographic group. They don't go to the primary care doc. If they do, they're going for reproductive health or mental health. But that stuff doesn't exist in the traditional primary care setting. So this idea that the healthcare industry is going to drive everyone to the PCP gatekeeper ain't going to work. There's no way to get there from here. So how did we get here? First, we have no common framework for defining what even behavioral health is. I used to say to my friends, Tony referenced some of the collaboratives I've worked in. The probation department, the child welfare department, everyone in education I would always say to them all, man, you guys must have had a really good therapist, because you're convinced the answer to every kid's problem is another therapist. Of course, we need significantly more treatment. But while we are all criticizing what we're getting, everybody wants more. And what I think that means is that we know we have a problem, but the delivery models we're using aren't working. Our public systems are deeply fragmented and under-resourced. We have a lack of clarity over whether youth mental health is an essential benefit or a public utility. Is it a public health benefit? Do we have a social justice requirement? Or is it something that health plans should be paying for? And as I've mentioned, our definition of medical necessity is outdated. It's tied to this sense of defect, of pathology, when we know that it should be tied to health and wellness, a response to adversity, and healthy development for all kids. So these are hard truths, and they require a new approach. I'm going to suggest that we can do so. We made these problems, we can unmake them. It's not leaves falling off the tree. How we got here is by a set of decisions we took. So the therapist in me says, let's go back to go forward, because we have a generational opportunity right now. So the crisis is real, but there is real opportunity. First is we now know the right interventions can change the trajectory. Treatment works, okay? What I sometimes say is that the first 20 years of heart surgery weren't so pretty either. If you look at the history of psychotherapy, we're actually in the first 10 to 15 years of the adoption of the CBT-DBT paradigm. Like if you go Freud and Skinner, right, the behavioralists, and then Erickson, the developmental psychologist, and then you end up in sort of today's cognitive behavioral narrative, the tools and modalities we're using are brand new. And we're just learning how to apply them at scale. But we now have new science, like the ACEs work, like the trauma-informed work, that should be informing both our delivery models, they're informing our narrative, they're improving our theoretical orientation, they're informing conversations like this, but they're not reflected in how we administer or how we fund. And that simply must change. Finally, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, if you only treat the kid, you locate the problem in the kid, and the kid's not the problem. We are stuck in the per minute, per unit, per kid, diagnosis-driven prison. And we got to get out. Because we know that 2Gen, family systems, trauma-informed work, treat kids in the context of where they live, work, and play, and that's what treatment should do. But our reimbursement doesn't account for that. Now you got to do every minute, every kid, pathology-based. So I mentioned this opportunity. For those of you who don't know, and we could talk about this quite a bit, counties are the place where the dollar becomes service. And we don't spend enough time in that space. Almost all of our local child serving safety nets follow this general paradigm of federal dollars tied to state dollars administered at the county level. Okay? I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but generally, this is how it works. This is your child welfare system, your juvenile justice system, your early childhood system, your education system, and of course, the regional center. The children's mental health system is like 3M. It doesn't make the product, it makes it better. The success of the children's mental health system isn't a bunch of clinics that you show up at. It's its ability to do its work in education, in child welfare, in early childhood. It's not a standalone service. Its success is the success of other people's systems, because that's where kids are. And I would argue behavioral health already has that footprint if we're courageous enough to expand it and adopt it. I mentioned ACEs, and I don't want to dig in too deep into some of the controversy around whether race is an ACE or not. But what I would tell you is that we know that children experience adversity. And we know that the vast majority, their adversity they experience impacts their long-term health outcomes. So we have new science and emerging practices. As I mentioned, the economic imperative is overlapping with the social justice imperative. What makes now unique? Why now? First is no one says we got it licked, right? There's a growing consensus that we got to do something. There are actually growing revenues. So as a county mental health department, 3 big state chunks came to us. Mental Health Services Act, 1991 and 2011 realignment. So I'm going to start to get into the weeds, so stay with me if you can, okay? MHSA, tax on millionaires. When I started at the Health Authority, we got 35 million. When I left, we had 55 million. The other realignment buckets are a function of sales tax and vehicle license fees. So think new car in the mall. What's happened over the last decade? A lot of new cars on the road, a lot of people at the mall. Revenues have increased dramatically. Whether you're reading the Little Hoover Report or elsewhere, you've seen there's somewhere between 2 and 4 billion of unspent non-federal share. And remember, every one of those dollars is eligible for a federal match. So I can reasonably, and I'm going to do so in the last slide, so stay with me, I'm going to show you that I believe at current levels of state expenditure, we could fund a $6 billion expansion of children's behavioral health at current levels. We have a unique moment to look at the fundamental architecture of our system in 2020. So again, into the weeds. California is one of the few states left in the nation that keeps behavioral health and physical health separate, okay? That structure was created in 1984 through something called the 1915B waiver. It's called a freedom of choice waiver, but you don't have to go into the detail. Think with me for a second. What it basically does is establish the county as the mental health plan for Medicaid. Since 1984, that waiver has been kicked down the curb every 2 or 4 years. It times out in 2020, the same year the 1115 waiver, which is the money waiver. Okay, so think carve-out waiver and money waiver. They time out together in 2020 for the first time in my professional lifetime. So we have a chance to both fund and re-examine the architecture if we're courageous enough to take it. So for those of you who really want to dig down with me, for those of you who know what whole person care is, in the last 1115 waiver, I'm envisioning a whole person care for kids. $3 billion. There's a national movement towards integration. By the way, if California doesn't do it, it's going to get done to us, right? You got to do it. If we can't prove that behavioral health is on par with physical health, we're going to start getting sanctioned by the feds. And by the way, you don't have to, what I like to say is, if you want to peel back the thin veneer of progressiveness in California, look at the health and welfare of children. Spending per pupil, spending per kid in Medicaid. We talk a really good game about the health and welfare of kids, but when you actually look at the service array and what kids get, it pales in comparison to what other states do. We have a new state administration who seems committed and appears committed to early childhood and behavioral health in general. We have a need for family system models. And the last one I would say why now is so important. At 4% penetration, remember what I told you, of the 6.2 million kids, only 4% are getting anything? At 4% penetration, there's no legacy system to kick out. So in the healthcare side, I've been involved with scope of practice battles with paramedics, with nurses, with PAs, with NPs, with docs, with specialists. If I told the physical health world, here's $6 billion of new resources, I'd spend the next 10 years fighting over who gets to spend it. In behavioral health, we don't got that. There is a unique moment to build a healthcare system for people, by people. We should be doing peers. We should be doing family systems work. We'll be social and affinity models. We should be paying people based on their lived experience, and there's emerging models about how effective that is. And whether you believe in the 12-step model and abstinence only and the Christianity aspects of the recovery movement, isn't it beautiful that millions of people get together tonight, bound by the common experience of suffering to help each other? Where is the social model for being black and brown in Oakland, for being a pregnant mom, for living in a poor community? There is such opportunity to use Medicaid to build the social cohesion and social capital that we know is essential to healthy development. So I see the workforce scarcity as an opportunity. We don't want to just do 50-minute sessions, do we? We want to do something different, and it's a chance to actually do wealth transfer. So I'm going to quickly do a highlight of some work I did in Alameda County, or we did. So there's so many people here who are part of this, so we, in the biggest we. And I offer this example because we learned a lot of really important lessons. So it's not a roadmap, it's going backward to go forward. Because we did all of what I'm about to show you in a pathology-based per minute per unit reimbursement. But we learned a lot, we did a lot, we're proud of what we did, but it has informed the critique that we're offering now about how to do it differently. So as was mentioned, I was the health director in Alameda County. We were about 1.5 million people, 5 SELPAs, 14 school districts, 13 hospitals, 22 hospitals, 13 EDs, 2,000 children out of home care. Beginning in 2004, when I came to the county, in 2014, we added 10,000 children to care, about a $100 million expansion. As far as I know, per capita, it was one of the largest expansions of children's mental health. And by the way, we had a unique thing going in Alameda County. I think 5 of the 9 leading children's mental health providers are based in Alameda County. So when I look at other counties, if you don't have Seneca, Lincoln, Fred Finch, West Coast, EBAC, and others based there, I had a group of people I knew who could do this work, and it was a good risk to take by providing resources to them. Not every county had that, so this is a unique thing. But we added 10,000 kids to care, and in schools, where about 7,000 of those 10,000 kids came in, we started out with 4 school-based health centers in 96, 8 in 2000, 12 in 2004, 14 in 2008, 19 in 2010, 26 in 2012, 29 in 2014. These are all federally qualified, built on the Kaiser model. We were using school bond money to finance them, but Medicaid funded all the delivery. Concurrently, we started 200 school-based behavioral health programs. So while the school-based clinics, because they're bricks and mortar, get a lot of attention, you can take a picture of them, the real success was we put a therapist in most schools. Now, we had all kind of issues, right? And so for school district folks in here, yeah, HIPAA and FERPA, man. And yeah, parents showed up with a baseball bat saying, why'd you refer my kid to CPS? And the therapist had to say, I couldn't tell anybody because it's protected. So all of those nuts and bolts and brutal, difficult aspects of coordination happened. But people of goodwill and good intention can work them out. The Buddhists say the truth is in the unfolding. And by that I mean the truth is in the doing the work. You don't collaborate around collaboration, you collaborate in the execution of a task. And people of goodwill can work these issues out. We did. It took us a long time. There was a lot of drama. It was difficult. But to anyone who says you got to have it figured at lunch, no. Kids are suffering. Bring care there, support them, agree to talk and coordinate, and you can make things better. We learned a lot. We're proud of what we did. In child welfare, we were also a Title IV county. We went from 5,500 kids to 1,200 kids in placement. With Tony and Lincoln and others, we emptied out juvenile hall, 468 kids to 65 in detention. And we added 10,000 kids to care. But I would argue we didn't fundamentally change kids' outcomes because we were treating pathology. We didn't take on the social justice argument that I'm suggesting. We didn't take on economic opportunity. We didn't actually provide resources to families to actually serve themselves. People are their own best clinician. They need therapists a lot less than therapists think they need them. So I'm going to offer some framework, and some of these words are just words to start a conversation. And man, if we're wrong, and we may be, and we are, I'm sure in some ways, these are just ways to help frame some of the conversations I'm talking about so I can get to specifics of financing. What if we adopted a new framework for behavioral health across the state and across all child-serving systems? And we said it simply. What if we said, look, it has a role for equity. Behavioral health is a tool for equity. And we said it's a tool for healthy development for all children. And what if we said, yeah, it's got to have better clinical efficacy. 4 to 7% of children have serious mental illness. They need care too. Let's not throw them out. They got to get much better than what they're getting. I've treated them. What they're getting is not right. So don't throw out the clinical efficacy part. There are seriously mentally ill kids. There's a lot more kids who are suffering from race and class and other tension, but we can't throw out the clinical need. And there's a chance to do systems change, to provide resources to schools, to child welfare, to juvenile justice, to early childhood, at levels those systems are so thirsty for, so we can free them to do what they do. The principals and teachers don't want to be therapists and doctors. Us asking them to do that is not appropriate. So what does this mean? So in therapy, we call this the miracle question. If you went to sleep tonight and you woke up tomorrow and your problem was gone, how would you know? So what are the circumstances of your solution, not the absence of your problem? It's a really important difference, okay? The first is we'd have a new understanding of the nature and scope of services. We wouldn't just be doing 50-minute sessions, We'd be doing a lot of peer-to-peer, a lot of community-based work, a lot of parent-partner work, social and affinity groups. At McClymonds High School, where I worked for 7 years, the story I love to tell, despite all the thousands of kids we served there, McClymonds had not sent a man to Berkeley in years. For decades. 4 freshman men got together and said, we're going to Berkeley. Tisha knows the story. I mean, it actually gets me filled with emotion when I think about it. I didn't treat a single one of these kids. I won't say their names. These 4 kids decided as freshmen that they were going. And while there are beautiful parents all in this family community, there was one real central family that supported everybody. And 4 years later, those 4 guys were the first 4 guys to go to UC Berkeley from McClymonds High School in decades. And the story I like to tell there is they got themselves together. They made a pact with themselves, and they built social capital and social cohesion amongst each other and helped each other get out of jail, helped each other get off the street, and do amazing things. That's what I think Medicaid should do. Now, it does need to do the 50-minute session too, but that story is a powerful one and it taught me a lot. That's what I mean by nature and scope. We got to match dollars at the state level. Stop asking providers and counties to run these incredibly burdensome administrative tasks with little hope of generating the revenue needed. We have to do new collaborative purchasing models. By that I mean juvenile justice, child welfare, education, and behavioral health should purchase together. Not one serving the other, but make a decision together about where resources go so we can stop the infighting of, you didn't give me enough. There is always going to be scarcity. There always will be. But imagine a future state where there was something in a jurisdiction called a children's trust, or call it whatever you want, I don't care, where child welfare, juvenile justice, parents, providers, kids, school districts, and others sat together and made decisions together about scarce resources and how to apply them. That's the suggestion we're making here. And by the way, procurement in counties also sucks. So in order for me to do a lot of stuff, I have to cheat, and that doesn't work, right? It takes 9 months to get a service from conception to delivery, and what happens in those 9 months? People suffer inappropriately. So we need to move much faster. Health plans, by the way, can buy in 30 days. I'm not saying end the carve-out, by the way, so please. Sometimes this conversation begins with, oh, Alex, you're just saying dump everything in managed care. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to plan together. We have to measure new measures of child well-being, and there is no way to get around the fact that we have to do a dramatic expansion of dollars. I sometimes hear, oh, look at all this money. We have children, we don't need money. It's not about money. Yeah, it is about money. It actually is about money. We need new resources to incent the collaboration necessary, but also to expand services. So I'm on my last 2 slides. Thanks. So how can we pay for it? So this is the money slide, literally, okay? This is where I'm going to tell you at least 4 viable strategies to come up with $6 billion. Okay. Go with me. I'm not making it up. The waiver strategy would be to use the 1115 waiver in 2020 to renegotiate a bundled payment from the feds, very similar to whole person care, the project we just spent the last 4.5 years doing for homeless and the reentry population. So Google whole person care, Google 1115 waiver, and just think kids. Right. That's a short-term strategy because the waiver's over in 5 years. It doesn't give you the long-term sustainability, so remember, it's just a placeholder. But it could provide the type of infusion of billions that could generate the change that I'm talking about. The second strategy is the growth strategy, and by the way, these all have issues, right? They're all fraught with challenges. There's going to be a compromise. The growth strategy would be to claim growth on MHSA and 2011 realignment and pledge it and dedicate it to kids. This strategy has been used before, IHSS. Other folks have claimed growth on other pots of funding. I don't love this one because it pits people against each other and you'll end up in a fight. Oh, no, I want it. No, you get it. But it's been done before, and if you prioritize kids and you prioritize behavioral health, you could get the multi-billion-dollar non-federal share you need to get matched by the feds. So let's call that the growth strategy. The third one is called a state plan amendment. I've done these before. We sustained our pediatric trauma service, not behavioral trauma, but the physical trauma, the 911 receiving centers. We sustained our trauma services in Oakland by working with LA to create a state plan amendment that brought in federal matching in just one hospital over $50 million a year. So state plan amendments are ways to take the under reimbursement of the federal level. So you set up a cost, you're getting paid down here. If you see that gap, if you add $1, you get $1. That's what spas do, is they give you a chance to generate revenue. So I could see a spa for children's behavioral health. And in fact, I think the feds would welcome it. This last one, I will say be very careful with this because you walk your way into a block grant and you'd be in deep trouble. So I want to say to everyone, I see some knowing heads like, ooh, okay. So, ooh, yes. The art of this one is a careful negotiation that doesn't lock you into block grant. Because block grants do what block grants do. They're bad for poor people. They never work, right? You never want to put yourself in a box that you can't get out of. But you could, let's just pretend for a second that in 2020 we get a Democratic win. And that presidential candidate is looking down and saying, geez, thank God for California. Thank you, California. Could they offer an increased FMAP? Yeah, that's what the Affordable Care Act did, right? For the newly eligible, it gave us a 90 cents on the dollar from the feds instead of the 50-50. So I will say, one of my great frustrations of the current state of affairs at the federal level is that foundations and everyone else has decided that the solution right now should be to entrench and protect. By the way, things suck for poor people before we elected this yokel, right? Like, we need to continue to dream big, don't stop. And that's why EPSDT is unique, it's an entitlement. It doesn't matter who your president is, you can still generate revenue. The feds can't say no when you put up $1. There's no, it has to happen. So could you negotiate a capitation or enhanced FMAP? Yes, I believe that opportunity will be there in 2020. And the last one I'll add, just because I just added this morning to the slide deck, or last night to the slide deck, because I'm getting so much interest in it. Counties are so challenged in the fiscal capacity to generate the revenue that we need to leave in there the possibility that none of these work, and that me and a group of people should go out to counties and teach them how to claim Medicaid. So as you can tell, I'm not exactly psyched about that, but that work has to be done. I think it would be doubling down on a broken system, but the reality is you can get there from here. And that work should be being done. More resources is better than doing nothing and wringing your hand at the problem. So the last slide here is what you can do, because I think it's important. We need you. As you can tell, we're trying to build a movement and engage folks in this in a broad way. You can go to the cachildrenstrust.org and join our coalition. So just in the last couple of weeks, we've had 50 organizations and individuals join. It's growing fast. It basically affirms some key principles of more, better for kids, different. I can't imagine anyone in this room would say, oh, I don't want that, right? You can sign up. You can read and share our policy briefs. We just tried to distill and unpack the 40-year history of behavioral health in California and show you that a bunch of dumb decisions were made that put us in the box we're in, that we don't have to do it this way, we can do it differently. So read and share our policy briefs. You can review our letter to the governor-elect. It'll be posted on the website either tonight or tomorrow. We are making a suggestion to the governor-elect about these opportunities, and we're trying to do it in a way that says, look, we're not asking you with our hands out. We're saying use the mechanisms at your disposal to generate the revenue to do this for child-serving systems. And you can participate on our design teams and co-construction convenings. These are beginning in January and February. We're coming to a county near you. We'll ask you to sit down with us, take some of the ideas that I've already put out there and say, no, you got that right, you got that wrong. This is how it might look like in our county. And of course, you can support us financially, but we're doing real well there, and I want to thank the Zellerbach Foundation and our 7 other funders for getting behind this crazy idea. I think we can get it done. Thank you so much.